Minister, Budget 2023 reminds me of the kitchen sink, and what the government has done is put an overflow pipe onto the sink. But the difficulty is that you're not turning off the tap, and if the water comes in any quicker, it'll still overflow. And that's the difficulty, that this particular budget, while it is helping, and it is welcome, the investment that's been put in, it's not going to deal with any of the systemic challenges, particularly in relation to the cost of energy and the cost of electricity. We see that the retrofitting targets are falling dramatically short of what was set out in Project Ireland 2040. Retrofitting, a measure that can reduce the electricity costs permanently for people. In Project Ireland 2040, it set out a commitment to retrofit 45,000 homes per annum from 2021. The target for next year is just 37,000 homes. And there is nothing in this legislation or in this budget to address the issue of standing charges for electricity. Electricity standing charges today are between €500 and €700 a year on families. And of course, we passed legislation here last July to increase the cost of those standing charges by another €120. And disappointingly, the government, rather than making an announcement on a windfall energy tax, is awaiting measures to happen at European Union level, instead of applying the Renewable Electricity Support Scheme clawback, something that I was involved in developing as Minister, into the renewable energy, wind and solar farms that are making excessive profits under the existing old renewable energy feed-in tariff. So using the new clawback model that has been developed, has been approved, has been adopted by the renewable energy companies here in this country, we could actually hand money back to electricity customers across this country. Now, the budget yesterday and the substantial amount of money, €11,000 million, that was handed out to people, was only possible because of our corporation tax. And the Department of Finance estimate that between €8 and €10 billion of corporation tax taken in this year is vulnerable to shock. In fact, the Minister, in his contribution yesterday, pointed out that 10 multinational companies account for over 1/3 of the total tax take by revenue. And without that money coming in, there would have been a significant deficit this year of €8,000 million instead of a headline surplus of €1 billion. Now, we need not just to acknowledge that, which the Minister did yesterday, but we need to put a replacement in place. And the only effective way to do that is to have a sovereign wealth fund that is actually built on our own natural resources. And anywhere across the globe where we have a sovereign wealth fund, it is built on the natural resources of that country. Now, Ireland has a 220 million acre maritime resource off our coast, where we have the potential to develop 70,000 megawatts of offshore renewable electricity. Now, we need to think outside the box and implement ambitious solutions to clean up our energy supply, to provide sustainable long-term employment opportunities, and ensure that Ireland becomes a global renewable energy exporter. To do that, we need a radical overhaul of Ireland's industrial development policy to achieve our climate goals and grasp the opportunity that we have off our coast. Now, at the weekend, there was a headline in the papers which read, "EU downgrades Ireland's north and west to a lagging region." And that is because of the lack of industrial development along our west and northwest. And we cannot overcome that challenge that we have in our region in a piecemeal or in a haphazard manner. And in the same paper, we had reports that Shell is now withdrawing its offshore development plans for 1.35 gigawatts of electricity off our coast, which follows the withdrawal prior to this by Equinor, which was planning to develop 1.4 gigawatts of electricity off our coast. Between those two investors alone, they were going to generate enough electricity to power 2.24 million homes across this country. But we can never develop that resource. We can never provide the types of employment and opportunities that we could have along the west and northwest of this country, providing the balanced regional development, unless we develop a strategy which is in the long-term interest of this country and not just allowing these projects to be developer-led. And as I say, there are 70 gigawatts of potential off our coast, not only enough to meet our own long-term needs, but also the long-term needs of France and Austria together. And what we need to do is to ensure that we establish an offshore renewable development authority, similar to the IDA, that would drive a fully coordinated national action plan. It would have responsibilities ranging from research and development to supply chain development to the commercial deployment of renewable energy, and ensure that Ireland becomes the global leader in the export of sustainable clean energy. Now, in order to do that, we also need to have an export channel. And the best possible export channel for that is to develop an Atlantic electricity interconnector from the west coast of Ireland directly into the European grid. But we can only do this if we take a strategic approach. And if that strategic approach is taken now, there is no point kicking this can down the road, hoping that something will happen in the future, hoping that investors from outside will come in and drive the type of innovative change that is needed. We can only do that by driving that change ourselves, by setting up an agency and authority to drive that and to ensure that the Irish citizens and the Irish state benefit in the long term. Thank you.